Kaz Riley, thank you for joining me today on the Professional Hypnotherapist podcast.
I'm delighted to be here finally. I know we've tried to make it happen for a while, but here we are. So,
We just met at the Irish Hypnotherapy Conference last month in Dublin, which of course was organized by John Scanlon. And so we made our acquaintance there. And, I've been going around different people and trying to get them on the podcast, and I have great success indeed. So, Kaz, you're based, tell us where you're based.
I'm based in the Pennines in Huddersfield. I won't say sunny Huddersfield because it definitely isn't today. So I'm a Yorkshire lass, born and bred, but
Yeah.
my client base is a global one. So even though I work from the top of the hills, I get all over the place in terms of my sessions and my teaching actually as well.
Right. And of course, once you have a good internet connection, you can work anywhere.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank goodness for the internet, eh?
Kaz, you're known as the sexual freedom coach. Tell us about that.
Okay. So my kind of area of speciality is helping people find their sexual freedom, whatever that means to them. So I define it as the choice, and choice is kind of the key word to have consensual, satisfying sex life in the absence of guilt, shame, and sexual dysfunction, whatever that means to them. So that means different things to different people. And my role as a hypnotherapist and a sex educator is to guide people down that path so that they can get their sexual freedom. And that covers a whole host of things for men and women. Everything from erectile dysfunction and vaginismus to people having crippling shame around sex that can stop them even thinking about going into a relationship in the first place. So it covers a wide variety of things, and I kind of coach and help them through that to get them to where they want to be.
Mm. And it's an all-encompassing discipline that you're involved in, and there are you're probably the, you are a specialist, where there aren't many other specialists in that area. So it's a very specialized area. What brought you into that?
Well, lots of things. I mean, I'm an adult and I have an interest in sexual things like most adults do. I used to work a lot with fertility clients, and I discovered that a lot of those clients were having fertility treatment because they had a sexual dysfunction of one kind or another, in particular things like vaginismus and erectile dysfunction. And really just kind of an interest. It was an area that wasn't very well served. It was an area that I didn't feel I'd been particularly well taught in. Only because I guess it's not very served, particularly well served.
Mm.
And really just a passion and fascination when I saw people who were helping to overcome the sexual dysfunction or get rid of their guilt and shame. I just realized that there was a real need for that kind of work. And being the kind of loud Yorkshire woman that I am, I can talk about things very directly. And actually, I learned that that was a real asset in this kind of area because frank conversation needs to occur. And I'm good at frank conversation. So part of it, I think a lot of what I do actually happens during that first conversation where people just feel
Yeah,
safe and can finally kind of talk about this stuff really
yeah.
openly without worrying that they're going to offend anybody or upset
Mm.
anybody or be
Mhm.
embarrassed in any way.
Yeah, so there snowflakes, no snowflakes.
It doesn't help, but I can help people not be snowflakes when it comes to this. That's kind of the point, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah,
Is that they
yeah.
can, yeah, really embrace that part of themselves.
Uh-huh. And that you shoot from the hip, as it were. You say it as it is.
Yes, in life and in therapy.
Mm. That's well a good maxim to hold. The whole area of guilt and shame. I can imagine that it's a huge aspect of sexual happiness.
Mm.
If I want to, and if I'm expressing myself, incorrectly, you correct me because you're the expert. It's a huge area. So how much do you deal with that? You obviously you deal with that all the time.
Massively. I mean, it's the biggest block to sexual happiness. And it's
Yeah,
certainly one of the biggest blocks to sexual fulfillment because in society, we're taught all the time what's right and what's wrong. There are trends of what everybody's doing and, what everybody's not doing anymore. There's masses of just bad information out there about sex, and most people's sex education was based on either religion. We're not knocking religion, but religion doesn't usually talk positively about sex. It usually deals with that in a shame-based way. Sex education at school for most people is just don't do it, or if you do, something terribly bad will happen. Women are led to believe that if they're sexually active, then they will be less than, people will think less of them, they're going to get a reputation. And men, the kind of society tells them that they should be, they should be virile and strong and, want to have sex at a moment's notice. And none of that's true for anybody. So, that kind of misinformation leads to masses of shame. And then, of course, guilt. So shame says, I am bad. Guilt says, I did something bad. And sexuality and sex has a lot of shame and guilt kind of entwined within it. So dealing with that is actually fundamental to having a good outcome for a client who's looking to find their sexual freedom and to function sexually in a way that works for them. So yeah, huge.
yeah. And have you ever had a client come to you and not know what they actually want?
I think we all get clients that come to us and not know what they actually want. I do get clients that do that. They don't know really what their sexual freedom means for them.
Yeah, yeah,
And often they're kind of thinking what it might be according to what society's telling them.
yeah,
And that might be that, that well, on one hand, we're taught that we shouldn't be promiscuous. And then on the other hand, we're kind of being, you're certainly youngsters to today are being taught more that, sex is kind of a more meaningless thing. I'm kind of in the middle between those two things. So I think it's about helping people be comfortable enough in themselves that they can make the choices that are right for them,
mm,
regardless of what society's telling them or what everybody else is saying or what they think they're doing. We all had the thing in the playground when we were kids, didn't we?
mm,
Where, everybody was doing it when nobody really was, or very few people really were. And that doesn't change in adult life. It's kind of interesting. We're still given these narratives about sex, Hollywood and pornography. And so people don't even know what good sex is, never mind what they want from sex. They're often their view of it is so skewed that that's where we start, is kind of talking about what good sex would mean for them.
mm.
And often that's not what they thought it was. It's not being able to be like a porn star, for example. It's more often wanting to do something that's connecting and loving and really brings something into their lives and their partners that is a fundamental part of their relationship, which has got very little to do with what Hollywood shows us.
Exactly. And you deal with obviously you deal with men and women,
Mhm.
and you've authored a book. It's the Woman: How to Find and Understand and Embrace Your Sexual Pleasure.
Mhm.
Isn't that correct?
That's correct. Yes, I did.
Yeah. And you're giving a course. You're giving a course actually in Las Vegas.
I am.
Next in when is it in July? Is it?
In July, yeah.
Yeah.
I am running the workshop for that book, which I'm really excited about because it's a 4-day course which take people through that process. So we cover all kinds of things within that, including the things that we've spoken about, like shame, but also getting into an erotic mindset. I mean, people often have shame about their thoughts. Thank goodness this isn't the Matrix and we don't have the thought police, but people often worry about the thoughts that they may have. And sometimes they've even been punished for them in the past. If they've had to go to
Yeah.
confession and
Yeah.
confess that they had a perfectly normal thought, it's just a thought at the end of the day. So, there's all kinds of stuff that way.
Mm.
Um, but yes, that book and that workshop is only for women. Well, I always say smart men would read the book, Aidan.
Yes.
But it's aimed at women because in an area that's already underserved, female sexuality is even more underserved. And the stuff that's out there is often about being brought to a level or an expectation of what they think men expect. And really and truthfully, what I found most men want is just for their female partners to be happy and having a good time. They don't care what society says men want. They just want their partners to enjoy connecting them intimately and sexually. So it's really to help people do that.
Right. And you mentioned there about intimacy and about sex. Are they both the same or are they different?
They're different, but they're connected. So intimacy, we can have social intimacy with our friends,
Yeah.
that's not at all sexual. We can have financial intimacy with people if we share a bank account or the bills and all of that kind of stuff. Again, nothing to do with sex. And lots of other kinds of intimacy. But when we talk about sexual intimacy, it's not necessarily the physical acts of sex. It's about connection. It's about sensuality. It can be everything outside of penetration, and of course, including it. But it's not just about a physical act. It's about a joining of minds and bodies and values and all kinds of wonderful things that when we're intimate with somebody, it's much more than just having sex. We know, for example, people that are hooking up on some of these dating apps, these hookup apps, aren't necessarily feeling intimately connected to the person that they just hooked up with. That's more of
Yeah.
a physical thing. The work that I do is much more about the emotional and physical aspects of sex rather than just the physical.
Mhm, mhm. And it's an all-encompassing, I mean, human beings, we are sexual beings.
Mm,
It's part of our identity, and men out there, as you touched on it there, you spoke about, the whole area of pressure from outside, the maybe the societal's expectations or, the macho man.
mm.
I always say that, big boys do cry.
They
Would you
do.
comment on that?
They do. Big boys do cry. And, this idea that men are sex machines that don't care and they don't want to be intimate and they don't want to feel connected. And yet we look at what drives most human behavior, and that is actually seeking connection. And, that's why sex probably is one of the biggest things that will destroy a relationship or the lack of it, because there's a lack of connection there, physical connection. And when we look outside of the bedroom, of course, there's usually a breakdown in connection in other places. So to kind of, this kind of macho, I think there's a difference between being macho and masculine. And men by default are masculine because they're men, and women are feminine because they're women. And that's the beauty of the dance between the sexes, isn't it? And also, that masculinity, that masculine energy doesn't mean that you can't cry, doesn't mean that you don't want to be held or loved or connected. And I think that's where society has got kind of a bit skewed, where macho and masculine are being put under the same umbrella when actually they're very different things. One is a trope, if you like, and the other one is about, just what means to be a male. And that obviously encompasses many things, because like women, all men are different, and so they
Yeah,
should be as
indeed,
well. Yeah.
indeed. No, Kaz, you're an award-winning hypnotist.
Hmm.
You work with clients, as you said, all over the world,
Hmm.
and it's. I've lost my train of thought there. But I say you work with clients all over the world, and in terms of split between the sexes, would you get more men or more women to coming to you?
Okay, so I work with both. And if I'm being honest, I tend to get what I advertise for. So, if I'm putting out information that's aimed at men, I'll get more men. If I put information out there that's aimed at women, I get more women. I would say overall, my area of focus is probably on female sexuality. So that's where I get way more interest from women, probably because I speak to that audience. And that's because of one video actually that I put out during
Yeah.
lockdown. which was called "Can Hypnosis Help You Orgasm?" And we did a live demo of showing how hypnosis can indeed help people orgasm from somebody that was in, a different part of the country, fully clothed. And that just took off on the internet. So about 200,000 views into that now, and it's brought me hundreds and hundreds of clients of women needing help to orgasm, which tells us that that's obviously an issue for
Yeah.
a lot of women, and I know it is from the work that I do. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. You describe yourself as a sex educator. Now, in this world of, if you want to call it sex and therapy,
Mm-hmm.
some people may get the wrong impression as to what you actually do. In terms of, so you're a sex educator, which I love that term because it takes away from the whole area of, maybe being a sex therapist. So is
Mm-hmm.
there a difference?
Well, there is. I mean, there's a difference in terms of qualifications for a start. So in the UK, actually, you can call yourself a sex therapist without having a sex therapy kind of qualification. I'm a sex educator. I'm a qualified sex educator. So and that for me is about educating about sex, and then I'm a hypnotherapist with a specialism in working with sexual issues. What I don't have is a degree in sexology. I come from the hypnotherapeutic standpoint of the work that I do. And I'm very clear about that. So people know who I am and what I do. So when they're looking for the help that they want, one, if they've already gone down the sex therapy route, the sexology route, the psychosexual route, which is often what they find on the NHS, they know what I offer is slightly different. And also being a sex educator means I can go out to places and educate about what good sex is. I do an awful lot of myth busting. And
Yeah.
I also get a younger audience, the kind of the 18 to 25 audience that will come and ask me the questions that they don't want to ask anyone else. So I get a lot of, my kids are both in that kind of age group. So I get a lot of their friends and things come in and ask me the questions that they don't want to ask anybody else, simply because they know I'm not embarrassed about it and I'm happy to talk about that. So, and it's interesting. We think we've got good sex ed in schools, but I'm telling you, we don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess what you could also say, Aidan, is for me, I'm a sex re-educator, because a massive part of what I do within my work is actually re-educating the adults that come to my office, either online or physically, because usually a big part of their issue is they've got bad information. So a good example of that might be if you're a man who thinks you've got premature ejaculation, for example, and you believe that you're supposed to last from penetration to ejaculation for about 20 minutes, which is what most men do believe when we look at the research. The research also shows us that the average is about 4 minutes. So, just that piece of information can make all the difference, because then if you get a lot of anxiety about that, then that has a huge impact on how you might view yourself in your sexual functioning. Similarly, if you're a woman and you believe that you should orgasm upon penetration, we know that only 18% of women do, but I get lots of women thinking that that should happen, at this magical moment
Yeah.
every time. So again, just re-educating with that kind of information gives us a much more realistic basis to then build their sexual function from, where they're not trying to reach a goal that for most people isn't attainable. So it's in that re-education and education aspect of my role is key to the success of my clients.
Excellent. And you mentioned that you're coming from the hypnotherapy
Mm.
background. Um, and to what extent, Kaz, does hypnotherapy and hypnotic trance, what role does that play in your work?
It's a huge role. If we think about sex outside of hypnosis, sex is kind of a trance that's shared between two people anyway. It's that kind of altered state. So to help somebody through the difficulties that they might be having using hypnosis transfers beautifully into the bedroom, and also allows us to dig a bit deeper. So it allows us to get rid of the shame, because just talking about why we shouldn't have shame doesn't get rid of shame. We need to do the work around that. And a hypnotherapeutic intervention is ideal for that. And also in terms of things like building confidence, getting people to communicate, rehearsing things, taking control of the muscles of the body, for example, all of those things we know we've got bags of research to support actually that, work even more profoundly when we're using that, when we're using hypnosis as our delivery method. So it's essential to what I do. That's why sexual freedom hypnosis is sexual freedom hypnosis and not sexual freedom therapy, because the hypnosis is such a key aspect of it.
Mhm. And would you teach your clients hypnosis?
I teach all my clients hypnosis. So I teach them self-hypnosis or
Yeah.
get them to realize they do this anyway. Um, it's because, again, we can, if we help them with triggers, positive triggers, self-hypnosis anchors, whatever we want to call them, they're great tools to have that they're not having to think about in great detail when they need them. I always say the simpler that we can keep those things, the better, because when you look at some of the techniques that people have been taught to reduce their anxiety sexually, they're quite convoluted, or they're having to think of something outside of the bedroom. So, for example, the one that men are often taught is to think about their favorite football team and recite all the names just to kind of distract themselves a bit. When we want the opposite to be happening in sex, we want to be engaged and connected, not feeling like our mind's gone somewhere else. So
Mm.
that trance part of it and teaching my clients that in a way that's congruent with what we're trying to do is really important.
Mm. And an idea that comes to me is the whole area of context,
Hmm.
that everything is contextual.
Hmm.
And so you're teaching your clients, that whilst they're, imagining that they're in the bedroom or whilst they're in the bedroom. Is that correct?
Sorry, could you repeat the question for me, Aidan?
Yeah, in terms of context,
Hmm.
that you would be teaching your client, as if they were in the bedroom whilst they're in the bedroom. Not actually there, but, during in trance.
Yeah, in the same way. So if we've
Yeah,
got somebody with a flying phobia,
yeah,
once we've done the work with their phobia, we'll then run them through various scenarios where they're on a plane, the plane's landing, the plane's
yeah.
taking off.
Okay. Yeah, yeah,
So this is exactly the same. And it's a really great question, because people are often like, oh my God, you tell that, tell these people to imagine that they're with their wife or their partner. Well, yes, but how else are we going to give them the confidence so that they can test that?
yeah,
Now, just to be clear, because these are questions that I sometimes get, is
yeah,
that if somebody comes in for weight loss with me or smoking cessation or a phobia, at no point are they ever taken through a scenario where they might have an orgasm, or that, I get them
yeah,
to think about something sexual. So these are only with my clients, my sexual freedom clients, which is the
yeah,
majority of my clients now. But it's specific to the issue that they are here for. And yes, everybody remains fully clothed the whole time. The mind is our most powerful sexual organ,
yeah,
and we're just teaching clients how to utilize that. So I always say it's no different really than working with somebody with anxiety. It's just that their anxiety is attached onto sexual things that happen inside their bedroom. And as much as we would like it to, anxiety does not stop at the bedroom door. It goes in where with them. So that's, so yeah, all of those things. I'll have people imagining all kinds of things, feeling arousal in their body sometimes, but obviously it's done with care and consent and ethics and all the things that we should be doing with all of our clients
yeah,
anyway.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. From the therapist point of view, I suppose, would you comment about the importance of the intake? How significant is that to therapy specifically in the work that you do?
I am a in-depth intake taker because
Yeah,
it's really important. One, it gives me the opportunity to start having that frank conversation. So it allows me to break down a lot of barriers going through that process, because I'm asking a lot of direct questions and the clients will answer in a direct way. it also helps me to understand what's going on with them, especially because they do usually have a lot of misinformation. So the way I describe what this allows me to do, Aidan, is in hypnosis, we so often talk about the client is running the wrong program or the client has got a glitch in the program.
Yeah.
And with sexual issues, more often than not, they're just running the wrong program. So if I don't know what program they're running and then re-educate them with the new one, it doesn't matter how many glitches I fix, they're still
Yeah.
going to be running the wrong program. So that's why that's so important. And also, often it's a time when we think in the world that we live in now where people still, although more openly, they might be gay, they might be lesbian, they might be wondering if they're trans, they may be wondering if they're asexual. There could be a whole host of things. And it gives them a safe space to talk about that freely, where sometimes they've never been able to do that before. And often, through that intake process, by asking questions, they're able to reply honestly. And then for them, that's actually a big burden that's lifted off their shoulders.
In any work that we do as hypnotherapists, we do a lot of challenging the client's model of the world.
Mm.
It's probably the same in the work that you do.
It is. It's challenging it and offering a different view, isn't it? I think
Yeah,
so.
yeah,
Um, and allowing them to see themselves as a sexual being without any shame. And that's actually the biggest challenge, I think, in terms of their view, because for some people, it's so ingrained that they should feel shame. Even to the point where people who desperately want to talk to their children about these things to educate them can't because they're too embarrassed to talk about it. So, yeah, there's a huge amount of challenging their model or the view of the world, but also offering different viewpoints that allow them to. Sometimes we know we shouldn't see the things in a certain way, but we don't know what alternatives they are to see them. That's the problem, isn't it? Sometimes.
yes, yes. How significant, in your opinion, are the authority figures in our lives, particularly with regard to the sex education that you do? Would you comment on that?
So, do you mean for our clients in terms
Yeah, for
of,
our client,
yeah?
the clients, I say authority figures, whether it be parents or teachers or other significant people in their life.
Yeah, I mean, the ones that come up in therapy a lot are parents, teachers, religious kind of figures in authority, and peer group. They're the ones that come up the most, and they are very significant. I always go from the kind of point of view of those people were doing the best they could with the information that they've got, and also the shame that they carried. Remember, sexual shame is not a new thing. It's been going on and it's been passed down from generation to generation to generation. But they do shape people's point of view. So, and it can be little comments, even things like I've got a lot of clients at the moment that were told female clients that were told you should never trust a man. Look, your father left us, this guy beat us up, whatever it might be, which is, not a nice way to kind of grow up thinking that no men can be trusted for women,
Yeah,
because it's not true for the start,
yeah,
most men are lovely and wonderful from what I've seen. But it's things like that, or something very bad will happen to you if you do, or you'll ruin your life. This is another one I hear quite often. If you get pregnant, your life will be ruined. This is why a lot of the fertility clients were coming to see me in the first place, because even though they wanted to get pregnant, they'd met all their criteria. They were still holding on to these beliefs that pregnancy would ruin their lives, and that has an impact on how your body might be receptive
yeah,
to being fertile, for example, to a pregnancy. So
yes,
yeah, it's huge. It's huge. We
it
learn
is.
everything, really, don't we?
Yeah,
So
yeah, we do, we
yeah.
do. Um, and you talked about fertility, and you worked a lot with, and you work a lot with fertility
Mm.
issues. Um, we, from my point of view, and indeed therapists, I suppose, hypnotherapists, we deal a lot with emotions. And, you know, have you in your work for fertility, how significant is the emotions and the effect that, maybe a significantly emotional time in a client's life.
Mhm.
How significant is that in terms of them getting pregnant or not getting pregnant, if I make sense?
It does. Well, if we just look at how we know our emotions are significant to our general health anyway,
Yeah.
that is why we have jobs, isn't it, as hypnotherapists, because the emotional part of life is significant. And that's not necessarily just because of how we feel, but it's how it makes us physically feel. So we know, for example, high stress, for example, will can have implications on testosterone levels, estrogen levels, progesterone levels, cortisol levels, adrenaline levels, all of these things, which have to be in such perfect balance for sexual function, for fertility, for pregnancy. And so it stands to reason if our emotions are all over the place, then that will have an impact upon that. The mind and body, we often talk about it as if they're separate things, but
Mm.
they're absolutely not. They're very much connected, going, the
Connected.
body affects the mind affects the body.
Mm.
So, the emotional aspect of fertility treatment is huge.
Yeah.
And then what often happens is clients are told that by their doctors, their fertility doctors, and they're just told, well, just keep as calm as possible. Well, what does that mean? And how do you do that? And all
Yeah.
of that kind of stuff. It's and then people start to get anxious about the fact that they're anxious, and we all know that loop as hypnotherapists. So it's very
Yeah.
much a way of helping people to not keep calm, but know how to be calmer or as calm as possible, and also accepting that in times like that what I always say to my clients, my fertility clients now is really when a woman who isn't going through fertility treatment gets pregnant, often when that actually happens, that moment of conception is a few days after she had sex. It's not at that very moment. The things happen, and embryos are developed and they have to implant in the womb. That often happens while they're leaning over the freezer counter picking up mushy peas, or
Yeah.
frozen peas in Tesco's or wherever it is that they shop. They're completely unaware. When you're having fertility
Yeah.
treatment, women are aware of every twinge, every turn. They don't know whether to lie down, sit down, stand up, go for a walk, go to work, take a week off. All of that is very anxiety inducing. So, really, it's about just keeping things as calm as possible, but also accepting that some anxiety will be there, because we're only
Mm.
human at the end of the day. And I can't imagine anybody that wouldn't be a little bit anxious about all of that. It's a
Mm.
big thing, isn't it?
Yes. And we have, as hypnotherapists, we have a great skill to impart to our clients in terms of how to relax and how to,
Mm.
be calm. Um, if
We
there
do.
was any man or woman out there who
Mhm.
is currently going through an issue, you can hear me okay, yeah?
Mhm.
Yeah, if there was any man or woman out there going through an issue, a sexual issue, sexual problem,
Mhm.
um, concern about uh, whether it be sexual health or whatever. I know you're not a doctor, a medical doctor. What would you say to them if they're watching and listening to this
Okay.
podcast?
Your first point of call should be your doctor, just to rule
Yeah,
out anything, because sometimes it can be hormones, sometimes it can be things like blood pressure that you don't know about, or an undiagnosed diabetes or a thyroid level. So, first port of call should always be your doctor. Doctors are used to dealing with things like that. Also, if they're a person that's taken an antidepressant, I would recommend they speak to their doctor about that as well, because we know that
yeah,
antidepressants cause a lot of sexual dysfunctions. Always talk to your doctor before stopping taking any medication, though, just to kind of reiterate that. And then after that, it's really about, if everything is normal, all those tests come back fine, then start to look into the psychological aspects of what's going on. And there can be many, but know that there is help out there. And it's not a case of just kind of what we call sensate focus, where about getting, just being touched and all of that kind of stuff. It's about how people feel about that. So if you're a person that doesn't like to be touched for whatever reason, we need to kind of help people overcome that fear of being touched before they're being touched, for example. Um, but no, also the mind and the body are really connected. And the other thing I always tell my clients is good sex and the ability to have good sex is something that we learn over time with people that we trust and that we care about. It's not something that we're just born with and we just know. And the amount of people that believe that somehow from the moment they become sexually active that they should just know it all and be able to do everything, um, that's just not the case. It's a bit, none of us could walk when we were born. So the idea that
Yeah.
we could have sex, the moment that we become of age is absolutely ridiculous. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's something that we learn, and it's different with every person that we're with as well. And that's the other thing to remember. And that's also something to remember when we're being with somebody. One of the big complaints I get from both men and women is when their partner says, well, nobody's complained before. And my answer to that is, well, you're not everybody else. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, all of those
Yes.
kinds of things.
Excellent. Now, Kaz, thank you for that. And if there was, how can we contact you?
You can contact me. The best way to do it is via one of my websites. So we have for clients, is the sexualfreedomcoach.com. For people that are looking to train with me, it's sexualfreedomhypnosis.org. We're also about to launch a new platform, which is a sex education hypnosis platform with loads of stuff on it. There's downloads and workshops and all kinds of stuff, and a monthly call, and that's orgasmicminds.com. So those three websites are usually the best way. And then I am on things like Facebook and Instagram and all that kind of stuff as well.
Right. Right. Well, that was very educating, Kaz. Thank you so much for your valuable time. And I know that the people watching this is going to get huge benefit from it. And thank you. So, Kaz Riley, sex educator extraordinaire, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.